It's a time-honored tradition. When there is a presidential election, there are also complaints that the press is putting its finger on the scale instead of giving voters the facts. Sometimes those gripes don't ring true, but in this election cycle, some of the critics might just have a point. Adam has more.
After Deval Patrick got less than 1% of the vote in New Hampshire, he dropped out of the race, saying the media's relentless focus on his timing derailed his campaign.
Maybe you entered too late.
You and Michael Bloomberg entered this campaign late.
It is going to be difficult for him to raise the kind of money he needs.
In a statement, Patrick said, the media confuses its essential responsibility to report what happens with its extraordinary power to influence what will. Sour grapes? Maybe. But Patrick isn't the only one suggesting the press back off and let voters decide. On primary day, this Bernie Sanders voter told MSNBC she backed Sanders because of MSNBC.
The kind of the stop Bernie cynicism that I heard from a number of people, it made me angry enough. I said, okay, Bernie's got my vote.
What's she talking about? Maybe comments like this.
I don't understand how Bernie is considered a frontrunner. More people showed up to the polls, highest turnout ever, and his percentage went down, not up.
Then there was Wednesday's Boston Herald, which said Sanders' win in New Hampshire doesn't really count. Also playing media critic Elizabeth Warren, who emailed supporters today saying she's getting less coverage than candidates who are doing worse. Case in point, in Iowa, CNN took all of Joe Biden's speech but cut away from hers.
You showed that we are united in our conviction.
Senator Elizabeth Warren there, if you're listening for a victory speech, you're not hearing anybody give a victory speech because nobody has any, there have been no results.
Breaking news that probably could have waited.
You know, Adam, we talk about this every day. There's no question that the media has its favorites, and it's not a monolith, but you know they play it, and even by words and phrases and characteristics and descriptions. The latecomer, and you know, Deval Patrick was often referenced, even first sentence, the latecomer. Was it fair?
I think for him, it was fair. I mean, he hopped in the race about a year or more after a lot of the candidates who'd been trying to build a presidential operation for quite some time. As someone who asked him, you know, how much of a challenge is it to be running as late as you are, getting in as late as you are, I don't think it's inappropriate to point that out. That's an objective truth. I think Elizabeth Warren has a bit of a gripe. You know, she's trying to raise funds. It was a fundraising pitch that she made this argument in today. But yeah, if I were her, I'd kind of be frustrated to see CNN cut away from me giving my speech after they stayed with Joe Biden. And I would also say I do think that Bernie Sanders, when you watch that Chuck Todd clip, and Chuck Todd is right, by the way. Bernie Sanders did not win the commanding victory in New Hampshire that he did 4 years ago, but he got less of the vote because there's so many different candidates running. For him to say, I don't see how he's considered the frontrunner, it sounds like he's just saying, because I don't like him very much. And that's kind of bogus.
Yeah. I think that Deval Patrick's point about the media should report how things are happening, what happened is, the timeline is what happened. He did enter the race when he entered the race. There's no criticism about that. It's just that's what it is. But I think that we tend to do a lot more opinion slinging these days than we did even 4 years ago, definitely more than we did a generation ago. And I think that opinionating is kind of being confused for coverage in a lot of places.
Yeah, I'm not buying any of this. I'm sorry. Deval Patrick got in late. That is true. Then, when he got in, his campaign was completely disorganized. All they had to do was pick up the phone a couple of days before he jumped in to get on the ballot in Michigan. They didn't do it. They whined about that. Deval Patrick's been whining about supposedly negative media coverage since he ran for the first time in 2006. Gee, he's had a pretty good run in spite of this horrendous negativity. Come on. Oh, the Boston Herald ran a front page that Bernie Sanders supporters didn't like. Cut it out. It's just
for the record, I don't know that any Sanders supporters even noticed the Herald cover.
Well,
but just
I was going to say, I don't think that's
Chuck
the key
Todd
reading.
said something. Stop it! I mean, listen, is there at times bad or unfair media coverage? Of course there will be in this great sea of media coverage. But I have yet to see a really provable example of what these people are complaining about. I just don't think it's there.
So I'm with you and not with you, a lot of you. So I think, first of all, I think that probably what would have helped Deval Patrick, because he was late getting into the thing, is to explain it better. Because everybody kept saying, well, why? Well, why did you wait? Well, why are you in? And yes, he referenced his wife's illness. But I meant beyond that. Nobody would fault him for staying out because of his wife's illness. But then to keep going after and realize how close it was to any of the big contests, you got to have a fuller description, I think, for people to figure out what's going on. And he did get some really good press about people hearing him in New Hampshire and blah, blah, blah. It just didn't work. There's a lot of other people in the race. What got me was after the New Hampshire primary results, and I thought there was then a lot of positioning by some, to your point, Lylah, well, that's it for Biden, and it may well be, which is probably why they stayed with him, because they figured this is it. We're not going to see him anymore. And so Elizabeth Warren is right about that, but actually it's a compliment to her. They expect her to be around. They don't expect him to be around. They made that choice. At the same time, there then was a whole lot of conversation about adding up how many people are in this group in the Democratic Party and how many over here, and what does that mean? And you can forget it going into Nevada, when, as somebody said, not me, 98% of the people have not voted.
I heard that.
Right.
But there is a lot of, this is one of your, bugaboos about, sort of keystroke cheap things like Tom Steyer and Michael Bloomberg are always the billionaire. Pete Buttigieg is the Westerner, the Midwesterner. That's a positive. Billionaire is a pejorative. So it's just keystroke, and that it happens a lot. I mean,
shorthands,
shorthands.
No,
electability, viability, all those things.
Okay, but it's a big jump from acknowledging that fact to saying, well, voters are being unduly influenced by this. I see no proof that they are, and if they are, maybe they ought to get off the couch, wake up, put down the clicker, and do a little research.
Well, Adam, you found that one woman who was mad about the,
I'm trying to remember.
the MSNBC thing.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But I would say that this played well for. Let's look at Amy Klobuchar. Okay, if you follow the media narrative, he's nobody. She's not. She did her debate. She came out. Then she changed.
And
there
at
you
this
go.
point, though, all the candidates are trying to reach the fringes, right? They're the really engaged people who are going to show up for the primaries and the caucuses. Everything's going to change again once we have a candidate who has to reach the vast majority of people and get them to come off their couches. Yeah, if we can find that. But they need someone who's going to inspire you to get up off your couch. And I'm not, we're not at that stage yet. So we have to wait.